Burying a family member is one of the most emotional experiences in life. But for an Overland Park family, the emotions still run deep. And they filed a lawsuit over a burial that happened a year and a half ago. Here's Amy Hawley with their story.
Charles Mochel, a proud U.S. veteran, father of 2 sons, husband and grandfather, now rests in peace. But the way he was laid to rest was far from peaceful. His family says a scene intolerable in a civilized society unfolded in the minutes following his 2010 service. The VFW, friends and family, his wife of many decades, had all said their goodbyes at Oaklawn Memorial Gardens in Olathe.
It's just hard to comprehend how something like this happens.
It was so painful, the Mochel family still can't talk about it. The service concluded, and like many families, the Mochels left. The burial took place while they were gone. Had it not been for one family member, they, like many people in grief,
may not have any idea what happens once they leave the cemetery. And it wasn't until probably 30 minutes later that all of a sudden one of the nephews who stood by at the graveside just to make sure everything was taken care of called and said something looks to be terribly awry here.
The family's attorney says a torrential downpour in May of 2010 had soaked the ground and filled the vault where Charles Mochel's waterproof casket was about to be buried.
He took photographs because he didn't think anybody would believe what he was telling them.
Instead of pumping water out or waiting for a dry day, the photo show employs lowering Charles Mochel's body into water. Family members say they overheard one employee jokingly say, "See, it floats."
At some point there was an effort made to put the cement lid on the vault to kind of force everything down.
Mr. Mochel's waterproof casket had filled with water. The family was stunned. Employees then pulled the heavy, now waterlogged casket back up with devices, and eventually they had to use a backhoe to lift the casket up and out of the ground. His sons, still in their suits, were muddied trying to help. The casket was too heavy to take back to the funeral home, so the funeral director of Pinwell Gable told 41 Action News they came back to the cemetery as, quote, good Samaritans to recover the casket, and they asked one of their employees to drill holes.
They asked, do you need to do that because we're afraid you're going to put a drill into my dad's feet.
The drill didn't touch their father, but once the casket was opened, the family says decency had deteriorated, as had everything inside.
There had been a note from his grandchildren that had been laid to rest with him, and that had bled all over his shirt, and it was a pretty horrific situation.
5 days later, another service. This time, employees served as pallbearers. The Mochel family says the funeral home charged them nearly $10,000 for another casket, services, and burial. Representatives at Pinwell Gable say they don't understand why they're named in the dispute, since they didn't control the original discounted merchandise or the burial.
And everybody kind of looks at each other and says it wasn't me, and ultimately the family's still the one sitting there with the bill and the botched funeral.
You're going to see this more often.
Who is to blame? Attorneys say the tough economy is partly to blame. They say it's increasingly difficult to know the answer when more and more families like the Mochels use third-party casket companies to save money.
For viewing, this is always tucked out.
The cost of caskets at independent shops like Nelson's Casket Company in Independence, or now even Walmart or Costco, can run half what they do at a funeral home. Attorneys say the more people involved in the process, the more likely the customer might unknowingly change each party's responsibilities.
We used to think is that you just go to the funeral home and the funeral director would take care of everything, even with the cemetery. But today you start unbundling, untying everything, and the family then begins contracting with different people. And there's more of a risk for things falling through the cracks.
So who decided to lower Mr. Mochel's body into water? The cemetery operators, D.W. Newcomers and Sons, wouldn't talk to us, but the funeral director at Pinwell Gable told 41 Action News had the Mochels bought the casket through them, he wouldn't have left after the funeral service and never would have allowed cemetery employees to lower a body into water. Kansas law requires them to be there throughout the service or the interment.
We're totally innocent.
Nelson's Casket Company is one of the 6 defendants blamed in the Mochel family's lawsuit. They say they sold the family the highest quality casket. The funeral home signed off on it, and the cemetery director from D.W. Newcomers and Sons buried Mr. Mochel.
They should treat everybody, no matter what casket it's in, no matter what vault it's in, and give it the same quality funeral. I'm sorry that their husband and father was treated the way he was treated and shoved down into water. I didn't have anything to do with that.
The question that still haunts the family today is why.
Funeral experts we talked to say the average funeral costs anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000. As more and more families look for ways to cut costs, no matter who you buy from, attorneys suggest to pre-plan so you can take the time to make fully informed decisions, not under emotional distress. Amy Holly, 41 Action News.